friends. I'm your host, Erin Port, and welcome to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. Life can be overwhelming and busy, so once a week, I invite you to join me, and together we will make simple tweaks to uncomplicate the hard parts of our life so we can spend more time doing what we love. Megan, I am so glad you're here today.
Thank you, Erin. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, before we dive into youth sports and how to navigate it well as parents, can you share a little bit about yourself and your own journey? You went from D1 college athlete to school counselor to now opening up your own mental health practice that specializes in helping athletes and their families. Why are you so passionate about what you do?
Yes. Well, I think it's a longer story, but in summary, I really just feel like I saw a need, and that's kind of where I feel like it's almost just like a calling, I guess, to kind of bring to light, how mental health impacts our young athletes, particularly, and being able to really be a bridge to like create dialogue and conversations about like the importance of caring for yourself. Coming from, playing at a top level in college, and even just like going back to playing multi-sports in high school and growing up, and just the sheer commitment and emotional and physical toll it takes. And even at some of the, not even at that max level, and working my way through those years and at college, and then even just like after college, trying to figure out like what do I do now? I'm not a soccer player anymore. Who am I? Having not put near enough emphasis and energy on getting to know like me, Megan, the person. And I think that that shaped a lot of my early years in my 20s. And I was really fortunate after a few bumpy years to feel called to go into school counseling, where I held that career for over 12 years, where I worked in public schools. I worked for a virtual school. I coached and worked with a lot of athletes, and I loved being able to be there for them in that way. But I also knew I had something more to give. And that's when I shifted gears and went more of the clinical route and got all the necessary licensure for that, and just on a whim opened my own practice. And a couple years in, started to really niche down and work with athletes. And I knew that it was a specialty that not a lot of people are doing, and yet it's so needed. And so that's where I am now. I own Carolina Counseling for Athletes, and we bridge the gap between mental health and performance for athletes, particularly high school and college level, and even like former athletes as well, and those professional retired old people like me.
I love it. So you've been in the sports world for a while. You're now a mom of a couple of sports athletes yourself. But from your perspective, what would you say has shifted in youth sports? And what does that shift mean for kids and families today?
Yeah, I think that we've taken a lot of the fun and the innocent joy out of it. It's no secret that youth sports are moneymakers. And so when the goal is to make money, oftentimes we lose that relational piece behind it, and like really like the best interest of the kids. And so that is something that it is where we are. There's really no going back, and just the intensity of it really just starts so much younger now. I mean, I didn't even start playing rec soccer till I was in third grade. And at this point, I would be light years behind, right? To where like, oh, I'd be done. Like there was no high level at that age. And so I think just the because of the business, because there's so much money to be made, people are committing to some of these bigger programs, whereas like the rec sports just aren't as big as they used to be, because now they're kind of watered down, unfortunately, and they're not competitive enough. And so we feel this need to like jump ship, do all the travel stuff, pay all the money, spend every weekend doing it just to keep up. And it feels like really confusing, but at the same time, there doesn't seem to be a lot of other, options.
Mhm. I have felt that. I shared with you, I have a 16, 14, 10, and 8-year-old. And there is like, the 6-week rec program for basketball at 8, or the AAU every weekend, and it's so hard as a parent when you don't make the rules to kind of figure out where you fit into those programs without making yourself feel behind. And we'll get to that more. But from your work with athletes, what are some of the biggest pitfalls you have seen that kids fall into, especially in today's sports culture? And
Mhm.
how can we as parents kind of support them in that?
Burnout is pretty big, and that kind of goes back to that root, the time when they're starting. So many of them are starting competitively at a really young age, so by the time they're even 13, 14 years old, when really, that's the time when we want to be able to notice, like, hey, what are we working with, right? Like, you hit puberty, like, here's kind of like the trajectory of your size and your athletic ability. They're quitting because they're just tired. They're tired of committing every weekend, all their nights, all those extra hours into a sport. And then they also feel conflicted, as in, like, well, I don't want to let down, mom or dad or my coaches, but really they inside have this like battle that they aren't showing up in their best self, and they start to feel more anxious. They might have some symptoms of like depression because they're just not happy anymore. And as parents, we invest so much of ourselves, and that's what we talked about before, that like, you know, we're also spending all of our time,
Mm,
doing this, and we form relationships with the other parents. And if we're not careful, it becomes our identity as well as being a sport parent. And so being able to separate yourself from the process and being really just like open with your athlete and say, like, is this still something you want to do? And we get those opportunities in the natural ebb and flow of a season throughout the year. Now, some feel like they're year long, but there
mhm.
hopefully some mini breaks in there. But that's such a great time just to check in with your athlete and just say, hey, like, how are you doing? Is this still working for you? This team, like, how is the coaching? Like, what are our goals for this next season? And use it as a reset so that they really feel like, hey, I like, my parents care. So I can see that they really love it, but I know that, like, if something shifts and like this is no longer working for me, then I can express how I feel, and that they're going to be able to take it and maybe grieve on it a little bit on the side, but like that I know as an athlete, like they're going to help me be supportive in whatever it is that I decide to do, so that it doesn't escalate into something much bigger.
I think that's such a good reminder of just having regular conversations. And like you said, at the natural junctures of like, okay, this is another season. Like, do we still want to do this? And it's funny because sometimes we just do things because they've always done them. And my
Mm-hmm.
8-year-old tried on baseball for size for a couple of seasons, and he's still fairly young. But he said to me, "Mom, like I don't really like baseball. Like we tried it on for size." And me as a parent, I'm like, "You're only 8. Like, are you sure?" But I had to like think it back. I'm like, okay, if you don't like it, sports is supposed to be fun. Like it's supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
something you enjoy doing. If it's not fun, then we can find something else. And I love that like that you said that the kids feel like they have a voice and that they can share with you honestly. And so having those regular check-ins, I think, is so important. And also, I told you before we hit record, my 16-year-old who's loved and played basketball, gosh, for over a decade, decided after his sophomore season he was done with basketball as a multi-sport athlete. And maybe you can talk to this a little bit. It isn't like it used to be. I was a multi-sport athlete in the 90s, and my kids are always like, Mom, it's nothing like it used to be. And I know.
Thanks for reminding me.
I know I wouldn't make the team. I know that. But
Yeah.
but it is just grueling to go. I mean, because it's not just, and one of the things he said is, I love basketball in the season. I don't love basketball 365 days of the year. And he kind of
Yeah.
realized in order to compete at the high school level, that that's what it was going to take. And he was like, I just am not willing. He's like, I want to run track and I want to play football and I don't want to play basketball all the time. And so that was hard because I had to check myself and be like, okay, like this is what we've done. This, like, it made me sad. And like you said, I grieved a little bit of that season being over, but like remembering this is his life and allowing him to make that decision with good counsel was good. But it was definitely like it took me a minute to be like, okay, if that's what you want.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's the smart thing, is like the wise counsel, right? About like, what are the reasons? What's the why behind it? And to be able to, not make a really, probably one of the bigger decisions he's had to make up to this point in life, I would think,
Yep.
to make that pull, but to be able to feel supported in it, and to be able to like have people, speak, who know him well, that can
Yep.
speak kind of like life into that situation. And then also like see the bigger picture, because to go from a fall winter, spring sport, that's really hard. That's a lot. So I mean, now oftentimes you see as like a multi-sport athlete, like we're talking like two sports, right? And even then there's always a crossover. So for him to go straight from football, he probably would have missed basketball tryouts. He came in late because those are overlapping seasons, and then going into track, which is kind of a whole different beast. Like it's pretty much every day, and then his summer will go into football workouts, right?
Mhm.
And so it just ever, it's evolving. And so at some point, and usually it's about that 15, 16, maybe when they start driving and they notice a little bit more freedom and the social life starts to pick up, then it's a gut check for a lot of them to be like, hey, how, like, is this working for me? How much do I really love this? What is it going to take for me to, continue to compete? And for those who are, wanting to maybe compete at the next level, at some point, more times than not, they do have to kind of zero in, because again, there's only so much time in the day to be able to dedicate to their sport.
Such a good reminder. And I love what you said that it gave him an opportunity to make a life decision. Like I love that about, there are so many good things about sports. And this was an opportunity for him to advocate for himself, like you said, to get some wise counsel and for us to help kind of, I always call it training wheels, but kind of put on a few training wheels as he's making these decisions with our support so that he can make decisions like this in the
Yeah.
future when we're not there. So a good
Yeah.
example of positive things that come out of all of this.
Oh my gosh, sports are like the ultimate life skills trainer. I mean, there's so many transferable skills, and I always like to highlight that of like, yes, the performance, yes, winning, all of that is great, but like you're learning so much about life and who you are, and teamwork and hard work and resiliency, so much resiliency, difficult decision making, communication. I mean, there's just so many wonderful things that if we make it just about the performance or just about winning, we forget about like how we're shaping them into, hopefully productive citizens of society, not
Mhm.
just like a really good basketball player.
That's a good point because I think so often we can say that was a great game or great basket, and we focus on the performance and not the effort. And as a former teacher, I know that I really tried with my students to really focus not just on the performance because we can't always control the performance, right? Like we
Yeah.
can work hard, but sometimes the basket doesn't land or the field goal doesn't land or whatever. And so this kind of brings me to my next question. My son's football coach, who I really admire. He's one of those great coaches that kind of gets it,
Mm,
gives kids the
so good.
opportunity to rise to the occasion. But he said at the very beginning of the year that I'm the coach and you're the cheerleader. So you leave the critiques to me and you be their biggest fan. And that
Mm,
just hit me hard because I think so often we see this on the sidelines of parents just critiquing their kids. And I've seen it where it's like after the parent is berating their kid for not doing the right
um,
thing, right? And I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on that. And then what is it that our kids need to hear from us the most?
yeah. Well, kudos to the coach for one, inviting the parents into expectations, because so often they just want to cut all ties. Like, don't want to talk to the parents. We don't want to, have that relationship because it can get sticky and complicated. But I think honoring that and honoring like, hey, this is your role and this is like expectations. It gave you a framework to work from, right? And so like, even if no one had ever said that to you before as a sports parent, like be a cheerleader, right? It gave you a time to reflect and like the importance of your role and how they don't need a lot of sideline coaches. They don't need a lot of chirping. And man, is it hard, especially for those people who are maybe really parents who are knowledgeable about that particular sport. There's almost this like entitlement, like, well, I know this, like I should share, I can do that. But you got to check yourself, because it's not always helpful. And with parenting, we're telling them to do a lot of things. We're telling them to clean their room, go clean your toilet, and then we're also giving them feedback on that tackle or on that goal or on that that pitch. And so what they start to hear over time is just blah, 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 blah. And then it impacts the relationship. And at the end of the day, hopefully that's the number one goal, is like parent child relationship, that it feels secure and safe and loving. And more times than not, that does require the parent to take a back seat, especially when their coaching days are over and they're in the high school ranks and they've got, you know, coaches that are doing all of that, to just to leave it up to them and just to continue to encourage them, be a sounding board, but also not be someone that is like speaking negatively, because that doesn't help for them to start to get that negative thought process around their coaches, because then it just spirals, and then it gets into like things you can control versus things you can't control. We can't control the coaches. We just can control how we show up, how our attitude is, our how we're preparing. And so be really leaning into that. So as a parent, maybe we redirect a negative situation with the coach, and like, well, how do we learn from this? How do we, maybe need to open up the lines of communication, but to really let them take the driving, let them drive this. And then you're the passenger. Like, this is their opportunity. And for those of us who already had our chance, it's really hard to stay in that passenger seat because we think we can do it better. We paved the way, we've been there. And so it's a lot of just like heart checks. It's a lot of just, saying less. And in that car ride home, being able to maybe identify and like identify some positive things that you saw, and then ask them, like, what did you feel? Like, what did you think about it? And just let them speak if they want to. And if they don't want to, go stop at Chick-fil-A on their way home and just eat and move on to the next thing, because it doesn't help to get highlighted all the things you did wrong. Like, human nature, we don't like that. We don't really want people to like highlight the things that we do wrong. And most athletes are pretty aware of when they messed up. So they're going to have their coaches watching game film and highlighting, oh, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. And then your parents are going to do the same. That feels tricky, and so being able to, that cheerleader, that passenger princess, to be able to support them, but they're driving their athletic journey.
I love that too. And like opening it up to like, how did you feel? And kind of letting them kind of lead the charge, and then kind of filling in with encouragement, where you feel it like it would be
Yeah.
helpful to them.
And I don't mean like blowing smoke, like
Yeah.
I don't even mean to like people. I think when I say that, sometimes they're like, oh, I just need to like lie, like, oh, you played great. Like, it's not about that. And when you don't focus on the performance, like, you don't have to,
Mm.
you don't have to almost like fake it and be able to, oh, you played so great, when really, that they didn't play very well. So like, we want to focus on the other things besides performance, on their effort. How did they, their coachability, there's a whole, when I work with athletes, one of the things that we do is we'll create almost like a grading chart for non-performance related activities, and I have them grade themselves. I'm like, I don't care how many goals you scored or how many home runs you scored. Like, how was your attitude? How was your work ethic? How was your leadership? Were you being coachable? How did you handle, failure? How did you bounce back from that? How, were you humble in that win? So those are the other things that, again, when as a parent we can highlight that, to say, yeah, like, I noticed that when you got pulled off, you went and talked to coach. I think that was really great that you were able to maybe get some insight and feedback. Being able to highlight the other things that are equally as important, but too often we forget about those.
Such a good reminder. Okay, so you kind of talked about this a little bit, like letting kids be in the driver's seat when it comes to coaches. And so how can parents tell the difference between healthy discomfort? It's so hard as a parent. We don't want them, especially these days, like we don't want them to
I
be
know.
suffering. It's so hard, but that's part of resilience. But how can we tell the difference between healthy discomfort that helps kids grow and emotional distress that requires intervention? When do you need to seek outside help? Can you help us with that?
I would say there's a few just like key factors, right? So being able to talk about like what discomfort feels like. So anytime we can drop them into their body and ask them to say how it feels, that's a good thing. That's getting them attuned with those emotions. And especially at a younger age, when there's a lot of different emotions happening, hormones are all over the place, to be able to really just like settle in and be like, what does it feel like? And we want to do that at calm moments, as well as maybe those heightened, were maybe a little bit more like irrational, anxiety provoking moments, so that they can get used to that. So like, the more we can put language onto like emotional intelligence, is really helpful for them to be able to, as they grow, learn how to express themselves in a way, and as athletes, like, we're taught to push down how we feel. We're taught to just, dust it off, put some spit on it, and just keep moving through. And in a lot of ways, you do have to do that, because again, like, you're pushing your body and you're doing things that are really difficult. But over time, what happens is that then you start to like really push down like how you feel about things.
Mhm.
And so we want to give them space and opportunities to like be able to express like how they're really feeling. So when I can ask them, like, oh, I'm starting to see some maybe signs of like something, and I'm questioning what is this, and being able to highlight like what's the difference between feeling uncomfortable where it feels just like, maybe like I have some butterflies in my stomach, some tension, some kind of like activation, disturbances in my body. But if we know the difference to when it's really elevated, where I can't sleep, where, I'm crying uncontrollably, where they stop doing things that they used to previously enjoy, where their anxiety is just like very elevated. There's a change in, habits, in food, in consumption, like what they're eating. Um, all of those things would be something like if they leaned into that, I'd be like, you know what? This feels like a little bit more than like just discomfort, right? And so, but to get to that point as a parent, and then I'm teaching them, okay, like how does that feel? Like, let me help, like describe that. So giving them maybe words. There's a lot of great charts online, especially for younger, kids, of like, being able to point to words. I have a feelings wheel pillow that I actually just used today with the athlete, because they don't know, like
Yep.
no one's teaching them like what are all the different feelings in this emotional intelligence. And so the more we can talk about how feelings can be fleeting and there's no good or bad feelings, the more comfortable and the more they don't feel like they have to suppress them. And then hopefully that leads to like, you know what, mom, this feels way bigger than just like a little discomfort. This feels like maybe something I can't handle anymore.
Mm.
And that, would be the goal, that they could express that. But as a parent, just recognizing maybe some of those earlier signs I mentioned, to say, you know what's the worst thing that happens if I have them go talk to someone?
Mm-hmm.
I can't really think of many, especially if you find someone that they connect with and they have that like free space to just to share the good and the bad. Um, Erring on the safe side is never a bad way to go.
I love that reminder. So good. Okay, so along that same lines, we kind of talked about emotions and like the discomfort. Um, but then what about what would you say to the kid? Like, what would you say to the parent that like got cut off of a team? Like, what would you say? That's hard for a
Mm,
parent. Like, I think sometimes our knee-jerk reaction is go to talk to the coach or what. Like, what would you say to the parent? And then what would you say to your child in that moment?
yeah, be sad.
Mm,
Allow it. Don't fight it. There's no reason to fight it. You're devastated for them and they're devastated for themselves, and they are allowed to feel that. And so as a parent, we don't need to fix that. There's quite literally nothing we can do, right? With grief, especially, because that's what that is. It's a grief of what could be, what was. Maybe, they've been on a team for a long time and they didn't make it anymore, right? So like knowing what they lost, but also on the flip side, that they don't get to experience it. So like that's, that in a sense that is a grief, right? It's a loss of something. And so how we get through grief is not by just like pushing it down and pretending it doesn't happen. We have to go through it. And so being able just to walk with them and be with them and just, I know I'm here. That's so hard. Eliminating kind of pointing fingers, because at this point, again, it doesn't help anything. There might be an appropriate time for them to like, for there to be an open conversation with the coach. And I think if that can be done in a healthy way, I think it's great, because at this point, maybe they need insight. Maybe they need insight because they can do something about it. And hopefully coaches, not all of them do it, but to be able to, my door's open to be able to like, let me get feedback as to maybe why not this year, but work on this, like, and to get a few things. And so in that sense, it's not, why did I not make the team? It's what can I do to maybe make the team next year, and giving them some like tangible actions of like skills that maybe they can work on to develop. And then allowing them to choose if that's something that they want to pursue. And so it is so hard. I made that sound so easy. And I'm sure a lot of people listening be like, you just wait, how that feels. And I'll say, I just walked with a good friend of mine who was another therapist through this exact same situation. And it was very enlightening for me because of how like amped up I got about it, about the situation for her. And so they as a family, I was like, just, I just reminded her, and she knew this. I'm like, you're allowed to be sad too, because this is sad. And like, there's nothing worse than like seeing your child in pain and hurt. And like, we don't need to negate that this isn't a big deal. And like, you'll get him next year. Like, none of that's helpful, right? No one ever needs a pep talk in that moment. Let him be there. And then like, when they come out, because they're so resilient and they will, what do we need to do about it?
Hmm.
right? And then kind of go into like, how do we move forward through this, but not trying to fix it immediately for them.
Such a good reminder. In full transparency, we moved my junior year, tried out for the cheerleading squad at my new high school, um, my senior year because I missed tryouts my junior year and did not make the squad. And it was, it was back then when like your name was on the form, or on the front door of the school, you had to walk to the front. Your name's not on the list, you have
Yeah.
to walk back. And I remember that, but it's crazy because that was so devastating. I learned,
Mhm.
like, because my identity was always to be a cheerleader.
Right.
And I wallowed in it and everything. And then, craziest thing, they started a golf program. I ended up golfing my senior year. And looking back, there was purpose in it. And like, I always say like I was so devastated I didn't get to do that, but allowing that, to sit and wallow
Yeah.
in it and be grief about
Yes.
it because it's like like you talked about earlier, it's a little bit of the identity of who you
Mm-hmm.
were, and then it was like, okay, who am I now? If I'm
Without
not
that.
a cheerleader, an athlete or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah,
Right. And how cool that you like were open-minded enough to try something new.
and I told
And
my
you
kids all
and
the time, like that was so paramount for me in resilience. I tell my kids, I like have gone back to that so many times of like when that door closed and I was devastated. It took me a minute, but then I was like, okay, like what you said, like what can I do about it now? Like clearly can't change that. So, like you said, choosing a different path and making the most
yeah.
of it.
And now you learned a sport you can play your whole life. Yeah. Do you
I
golf
wish
now?
I was better at it. It's one of those sports you got to play often and was a
You
mom of
have
four.
I am, yes, I am married to a golfer and I think, well, he golfs a lot, but I'm always laughing. People are like, do you golf? I'm like, who would watch the children? Like, we can't both golf yet in this phase of life, but
People always ask me like, "Oh, do you still golf?" I was like, "Yeah, about once a year. That's about
once
the
a
only
year. Yeah.
time."
Yeah.
Oh, anyway. Okay, so I want to kind of come back and circle around this because we talked about the system that we didn't get to create. So a lot of parents feel stuck like with, okay, so if they go the rec route, it's not very competitive, but if they go the AA route, then that's that. What do you tell parents when they're making these decisions? Like, do you have any words of advice for parents as they're navigating this, like what they should do and making these choices for their kids?
It's really important to understand what your family's core values are
Mm,
and to be able to spend some time just starting from like the baseline, right? Like who are we as a family? How do we value our time? How do we value our time together? How do we want to spend our weekends, our holidays? How do we want to spend our money and our finances, right? And so being able, if I can get that established, then it becomes pretty clear maybe as like how much commitment can I put into these sports? Also considering how many kids do I have? What would that look like? So for 4 kids, how much support do you have to get them to where they need to be? And if you're living where you don't have any family and like that might feel impossible, you're like there's only 2 of us driving, how do we get them? So even just the logistical piece of it, so like starting there. And then once you kind of have like, what, I think we could probably lean into like maybe doing something more competitive. This is what we've done. I think we have some more margin to give a little bit more. Then I'm going to do my own research. I'm not going to rely on my neighbor. I'm not going to rely on like my friend's best friends, is their experience, because I don't know that their values are the same as my values. And so I'm going to do my research. Maybe my kid's going to go, do some practices, or maybe I'm going to go look at something. And I also know I am much more hyper focused on this, and so I might be willing to do more. I might be willing to go watch a couple games or watch another team that I'm eyeing, and I want to see how's the coach coaching. I
mm,
want to see the dynamic with the parents. I want to see how the kids are engaged with one another. So like I'm trying to look at kind of like a bigger picture. Like if I'm going to put my child in this environment, is it going to be healthy for them? You know, is that coach screaming and yelling at my 10-year-old in the dugout and kind of having like an aggressive mannerism, but they win, but they're a winning team? Is that important to me, or is that culture, that community more important to me? So like that, if that's one of my core values and my pillars, then like that's going to also help guide me away from some teams or programs and might guide me towards other ones. And so being able to don't take people's word for it. because again, we're all coming at this with a different experience and a different lens. And so while I might be a little hypercritical on some components, other people might not care about it. And that's fine. Like, that's fine. We don't have to do the same thing everyone else does. And I can do things differently and take what I know, the information, and know who my kid is and maybe what they need. And I just make the next right decision. I don't know what it's going to be like in 3 years. I'm just saying, as this season approach, as this commitment approaches, like, what, with the knowledge I have, the data I have to support it, what makes the most sense? And then we're living on a prayer, right? We're just kind of saying, I hope that that was right. And if it wasn't, then we get to, take inventory of that and maybe make a decision later that, down the road. But parents really, I think, can get caught up in just like going with the flow. And sometimes we need to kind of jump off that and like pave our own path for what's best for our family and more and our child.
It's so easy, right? Because, your kid is on one team and they're like, get invited to another team. And you're like, they got invited. That's amazing. And then you jump in, right? And it's like, I love that you take stock of like, what is your family's values? Does this make sense? Does it logistically make sense? Financially make sense? Does this work with our family dynamic? And I think those are good things to just pause and ask ourselves. For us, my dad has a famous phrase growing up, and it said, it's not good or bad, it's just different. And it's okay to operate a little bit different in with your family if it is the right thing for your family. I think that's a good reminder. Okay, so as we wrap up, what's one piece of advice or encouragement you would offer parents around this whole idea of sports?
Hope you're having fun.
Mm.
It's going to be fun. And I have a 10 and 8-year-old, and we do all the sports, and I've been able to coach them. And I just am like, how do I make this fun for me as well? Right. And so if I'm taking it so seriously, whether I'm coaching or if I'm in the stands, and we're approaching baseball season, so I'm in the stands, my husband's coaching, but like, how do I, like, what do I need from this to enjoy it? So I can show up for them in a way that is, like, hey, I'm here for you. And so that would be like my, best advice for parents is like, figure out a way to like make this enjoyable for you, because you're already committing your time, you're already going to all the games, you're already doing all of these things. So what is it about it that maybe you can tap into? And you don't even have to like the sport, right? Maybe you just have appreciate that your child's out there moving their body, that they're, learning a new skill. It's like finding something that is positive about it, and being able to, like, I'm going to celebrate that in that moment, and I'm going to find maybe, connection with people. I'm going to get out of the house. Sometimes I'm going to enjoy the fresh air, like finding something positive. My son has a baseball game tonight, and I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and we've had pretty nice weather. And then we have this little cold front, and I know it's cold where you are. So you're like, I don't feel bad for you.
Yeah.
But even tonight, I was like, I watched that thing. Oh my gosh, like that game is late. Like, it is gonna be so cold out there. And then I was like, you know what? Like, it's pretty cool they get to play under the lights because they're young. Like, they don't really get a lot of night games, and they get to play on this like turf field. So that's kind of fun. So I'm trying to like spin it and like have this, just a mental shift of like, not like, oh my God, it's gonna be so cold. We're gonna get home so late. It's gonna be so hectic. But really like, you know what? Like, these are the days.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask to anyone, that has kids that have gone through it. They will tell you in that kind of like, way that they will, like, oh, just enjoy it. It goes by so fast. And it really does. And so I want to feel as present in it through the good times and the hard times, and being present in whatever we're tackling, so that I don't blink and it's over. And I'm like, man, I was just a stress bucket that whole time. Right. And so I can really just like lean into what it is on the hot days, on the cold days, on the late nights, on the early mornings, and just like be there, because I know I'm going to miss it one day.
Yeah. 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 I have a 16-year-old. You'll miss it someday.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Gosh, I got emotional listening to you. 'Cause I'm like, yep, you're gonna miss it someday. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of having a 16-year-old and an 8-year-old is I'm seeing like the end, right? Like his
Mm-hmm.
aspirations are not college sports. So I know at the most I have 2 seasons left. And I'm like, you're like, I just want to enjoy it. Enjoy that season with those
Yeah.
kids and watching them do what they love. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. I didn't expect to get emotional, but gosh, it's so fun to watch your kids do things that they love. And that's what it's all about at the
It
end of the
is.
day.
It
Yeah.
is. It's the best.
Okay, well, we're not in a therapy session. Wow, Megan.
Gonna
Oh,
be the first time I had tears. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, watching your kids grow up, it's the truest form of
Uh,
bittersweet, I tell you.
mm,
Okay, so I asked two questions to every single guest. They do not have to be sports related. I just love to know how people tweak their way to a life they love. So, is there a tiny tweak or a small change you've made recently that has made your life either feel easier or lighter?
okay, can I have two?
Yes, of
Okay.
course.
I have one that is sport related because of just the timing of it. So my oldest had his first baseball tournament, and like so many of us with some of these sports where we're like there for the whole weekend and there's just concession food and you're in the middle of the nowhere. Well, I I was like, you know what? I'm going to prepare. And I am not really great at preparing food, but I picked a recipe that I would get excited for. So I put some time in, I picked a recipe and I just batched it, and I preset like 3 different meals from it so that when I got home late or when like we were at the park all day, I just could bring it with me. And then then I was like, you know what, like maybe I want to get, you know, a snack later or whatever, but I had kind of like the nourishing meal that was going to really give me the energy to sustain me through those long days, and something I just kind of got excited about. Like I was like, hey, I haven't made this before. So I was excited to make it. I prepped it, and it really helped me fill in the gaps on those like really busy weekends when it's super easy just to like eat junk. And I know that's not going to make me feel my best. And then at the end of the weekend, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, I feel so gross. I ate all those hot dogs. So that was one tweak that I really hope I can continue on with and remember, how it made me feel. And the second one is I joined Walmart Plus. And
Ooh.
I am really enjoying Walmart Plus.
What about it is
um,
helping simplify life?
okay, it has simplified. I do not like going to the grocery store, and I also don't like spending a lot of time like thinking about like food. And so I have my like the customary things I'm always getting, and it just kind of like goes right into the cart. It's really easy. But then also for, the other day my son had to bring a spatula to school. Okay, well, just put it in a Walmart Plus order. I didn't have to go to the store. And in this, just with like in this season of life, like with my business and work and growing my practice and all the sports, I'm like, what's an easy hack? And this to me, like, it's only been a month, but it really has been something that has like simplified and given me a lot of time back, as well as, being able to like, if I needed something, I don't have to like, oh, I need to allocate an hour. Like I know that I can, having some thought forward thinking. But that's been something that I've really enjoyed and is definitely, a 2026 tweak, but
Hey,
it's available, so why not use it?
exactly. And it's one of those things because I'll use Instacart and it's one of those things that I kind of forget about it. And then I'm like, it's a busy week. I can have the groceries delivered. It's no big deal, right? It's like we
Yes.
almost have to be reminded that that is a possibility.
Yes, definitely. And I've had my kids kind of help me. I don't particularly like bringing them to the store because all of a sudden, like everything that you don't want to buy ends up in the cart. But like I will say, what are some of the food items you want? And like we pull it up on the app together. And so I really do try to use it also as a moment of like talking about like how we're using food as fuel for our brains to be able to be, our healthiest self and body, but also like as we're approaching our work or our school days and how the food we eat is really impacting that. So like I do try to use it also as like a teachable moment, and not just like sit there and like click, click, click in isolation. So I try to bring them into the mix.
I love that. Such good intentional advice. Okay, and the last question I ask everybody, because life is all about being enjoyed, what's a tiny joy that you've enjoyed lately besides watching your kids play their baseball
Besides
games?
watching my kids, I have been trying to be intentional about connecting with friends,
Mm,
and being able to schedule whether it be a coffee date or something like that. So like I'll think of someone, and instead of just thinking about them, I might send them a message and try to get like a date on the calendar to connect. So that's something that has been just like life-giving to me. And I need my friends just like, we all need our people. And so being, at this stage, like it doesn't happen. If I sat around and waited, it would just not happen. And so really being like proactive and continuing that connection and even like building connections with new people.
I love that. Not just thinking about them, but then texting them and getting something on the calendar. That is such a good reminder. Well, Megan, you were a delight. Where can people find you online? Because they might have some more questions as it relates to
Yeah.
kids and sports. I
Yeah,
know you do, like you talk with coaches and you talk to people all the time about this. So tell them where
I
they can
do.
find you.
Yeah, my website and my business is called Carolina Counseling for Athletes. I'm based out of South Carolina, so I'm able to see clients individually or in person within the state of South Carolina. But I do a lot of trainings and teachings, whether we be with coaches or parents groups or athletes, on how they can either how they can support their athlete or even themselves through these wonderful phases of life.
And they are, but man, I tell you, going through it as a parent is different than as an athlete.
I know. I feel like I was way more laid back then, but I really do try to be laid back now because I'm like, it's not good for my brand if I'm like a crazy sports parent. No one would hire me. So I got to keep it in check.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you, Megan, for sharing your insight with us. It was definitely eye-opening and an encouragement and so much practical help too.
Thanks, Erin.
You liked this episode, it would mean so much if you'd share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review so others can find our show. Until next time, you can find me at Simple Purposeful Living on Instagram and Facebook.